What's up guys? For today's video, I will tell you a story of a boy who lost everything. And how can he take revenge to the people who did that to him? So, just relax, and let me tell you on what happened about the movie. The story begins in 895 AD, while Prince Amleth watches as his father, King Orvondel wore Raven, when he returns home with his men after a series of conquest. After that, the king greets his son Amleth and his wife Queen Gudrun. And when they're hosting a ceremony, they are visited by Orvondel's brother, named Fjolnir. Meanwhile, the jester Hymir makes a crass joke about Gudrun, which Fjolnir dislikes, but Orvondel says it's only a jest. As the king has been injured in battle, he is set to make Amleth his successor. So he brings his son to Hymir, where they engage in a ritual and they drink a special concoction. Orvondel has Amleth promise that if he's ever slain by someone, Amleth will fulfill his vow to avenge him. So, Amleth agrees, and Hymir takes Amleth's teardrop, for it is to be the last one that he will ever shed, until the day he will need it again. The following morning, Amleth is out in the woods with his father, when several men riding in horses fired arrows at Orvondel. Although he attempts to fight him off, the men overwhelm him and stab him with their swords until he is on his knees. Leading the men is Fjolnir, who is attempting to usurp his brother. Orvondel warns Fjolnir that while he may have killed him today, his reign over the kingdom will be brief. Fjolnir beheads his brother, and orders his men to find and kill Amleth, but the boy runs and hides. Although he nearly caught by Fjolnir's soldier, named Finna, he managed to cut off his nose and flees. As he runs back into his village, he finds Fjolnir's men pillaging and murdering the citizens. And Fjolnir is carrying his mother Gudrun, as she kicks and screams. After that scene, he runs to the ocean where he takes a boat and sails away, repeating a vow to himself, "I will avenge you father. I will save you mother, and I will kill you Fjolnir." Years later, Amleth became part of a group of Vikings, and grows up to be a berserker after a ritual of their own. The men later raid a village, where Amleth slaughters the soldiers, and the rest of his group goes after women and children, while the surviving citizens are taken as slaves. At night, Amleth wanders into a dark and empty temple, where he sees a vision of a blind seeress, who presents him with the last tear that he shed, to remind him of his vow that he made as a child. She tells him that he will now have another chance to avenge his father, save his mother, and kill his uncle. The next day, he speaks to fellow berserker named Erika, who states that Fjolnir had been overthrown from his kingdom by King Harald of Norway, forcing him and his people to relocate to Iceland. Amleth then sees a raven, taking it as a sign from his father, to carry out his mission of revenge. After that, he began to act for his revenge, so he brands himself with the mark of a slave, and swims to a slave boat with other Rus people. And there, he meets a young Slavic woman named Olga, who claims to have the power to corrupt the minds of men. As he sleeps next to her, Amleth sees visions of Orvondel, Gudrun, Hymir, a special sword, and also Olga. The boat appears to have capsized during a storm, killing some slaves while the survivors swim to land. When they reach the shore, they are taken by Fjolnir's men and brought to his farm, where he has taken Gudrun as his wife. He also has a son with her, whose name is Gunnar. Fjolnir takes note of Amleth, but he did not recognize him. He only notes his size and strength, and when he sees Olga, he also takes a special interest in her. Later that night, Amleth sneaks out of his tent, and attempts to go after Fjolnir, but he sees an animal, and follows it into another tent where he meets a wizard. The wizard is holding the head of Hymir, whom Fjolnir had murdered. He manages to create a communication between Amleth and Hymir. After that, Hymir tells Amleth about the mighty sword Draugr, which Amleth will use to carry out his revenge. Amleth comes upon Draugur's location, where it rests with the corpse of a former king. As he attempts to grab the sword, the corpse appears to come to life and fight him in a duel, ending with Amleth swinging his axe upon the skeleton, and beheading it before he can pull the sword from its bony hands. When he returns to the village, he nearly uses the sword on several men, but decided to hold off for the time being. Then he watches as Fjolnir attempts to have his way with Olga, but she repels him by smearing her menstrual blood on him. After that incident, the slaves are later put to a game of Natlaika, a violent version of lacrosse, where players can beat and kill their opponents to win. Suddenly, Gunnar runs into the field as he wishes to play along, but the participants' captain, named Thorfinnur, knocks Gunnar over so hard that he hits his head and is knocked unconscious. As his mother and father rush onto the field, Amleth attacks Thorfinnur and headbutts him repeatedly until his skull is caved in. Because of what he did, Amleth is thanked by Fjolnir and Thora, the other son of Fjolnir, and they grant him a higher position among the slaves. The slaves later gather for a party in the woods, where they have sex with each other, so Amleth consummates his relationship with Olga. After they finish making love, they make vows that together they will bring down Fjolnir. Over the next few nights, Amleth takes Draugr and slaughters some of Fjolnir's men, including Thora's friends. He hangs their corpses outside for Thora to find, where he yells in despair over the loss of his friends and vows to find the man responsible. That same evening, Amleth kills 2 people about to engage in a sacrificial ritual with a slave woman. He hangs their disemboweled corpses for Fjolnir and his men to find. Meanwhile, Olga aids Amleth by slipping some of Fjolnir's men hallucinogenic mushrooms that drive them insane and cause some of them to kill themselves. In another instance, Amleth gets wolves to howl, riling up Fjolnir's dog to attack him and prompt him to stab the dog to death. Amleth later goes to Gudrun's room where he reveals himself to her. She is stunned to see him, but not out of relief for her son being alive. Although he tells her that he is there to free her, Gudrun reveals that she is not Fjolnir's prisoner, but that she genuinely loved him and agreed to marry him. She also tells him that it was her who asked Fjolnir to kill Orvondel, as he had taken her as a slave and raped her, which is how Amleth was conceived. She had also asked Fjolnir to kill Amleth as well. Gudrun makes an attempt to seduce Amleth, but he pulls back. Enraged by this revelation, he impales Thora in his sleep and cuts out his heart. Fjolnir weeps over his son's body and begins to accuse the slaves of being guilty of Thora's murder. He begins to kill some of the slaves, but when he gets to Olga, Amleth steps out with a bag that he claims contains Thora's heart, and will give it to him in exchange for Olga's life. After fighting off some of the men, Amleth becomes overwhelmed. Fjolnir takes the bag, but Amleth says it is the heart of the dog he killed. Amleth is taken prisoner and is brutally beaten so that he may give up the location of Thora's heart. When Fjolnir and his men have their backs turned, a pack of ravens, apparently sent by Odin, come to free Amleth. He flees on a boat with Olga, but when he kisses the wound where Fjolnir placed his blade on her, he sees a vision of twins that are meant to be Amleth and Olga's children. Knowing that they will never be safe as long as Fjolnir lives, Amleth swims back to the farm to finish his mission. Olga weeps for Amleth but makes a prayer to guide him. Upon his return, Amleth slaughters Fjolnir's men and frees the rest of the slaves. Then, he is attacked by Gudrun, who begins stabbing him until he impales her through the heart. He is then attacked by Gunnar, who also stabs him repeatedly, but Amleth kills him with a slash to the chest. Fjolnir finds the body of his wife and child, and then says to Amleth that they will duel at the gates of hell. Amleth travels to the volcano called Hekla, where he comes upon Gudrun and Gunnar's bodies and pays respects to them. He finds Fjolnir and they engage in a duel called Holmgang. With their swords, they fight over the lava, with Fjolnir nearly overpowering Amleth, but the prince gathers his strength and wits to continue the fight. The battle ends when Fjolnir stabs Amleth through the heart, but he succeeds in decapitating his uncle. After their fierce battle, Amleth is dying, but he sees a vision of Olga with their twins, one of whom will become the Maiden King that the seeress had prophesied. And then, a Valkyrie spirit arrives to escort him to Valhalla. And that's the end of the story of revenge, and fulfilling the promise of the prince who lost all that he had, including his father, his mother, and his kingdom. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. See you in our next movie recap.